You don't raise a child expecting applause. You raise them with scraped knees and school lunch arguments, with Christmas mornings where you buy the wrong dollhouse because the right one was out of stock, with nights when you fall asleep in the driver's seat, waiting for them to come out of practice. You raise them because you love them, and sometimes that love looks like exhaustion. I raised my daughter, Claire, in my late 30s, after a divorce I never wanted and she never understood. Her mother remarried quickly, someone younger, shinier, with money he didn't have to work 60 hours a week to make. He bought her horses and vacations. I bought her textbooks and braces. I wasn't the fun parent. I was the one who showed up at dentist appointments at 7 a.m. and held her hand through panic attacks over exams. You don't get parades for that. You don't even get thank yous. You just do it until they're grown. I always thought she'd see it one day. That was my mistake. The night everything broke, my 64th birthday, was a perfect example of the kind of evening you assume will be forgettable until it isn't. Not a milestone, not a wedding, not a funeral, just a dinner. We held it at my house because Claire insisted on it. "Dad, you said you've been lonely lately," she told me over the phone, her voice brisk and cheerful. "That place needs laughter. Let us bring some." I didn't realize then that laughter meant the laughter of other people at my expense. They arrived late, nearly an hour past the time she suggested. Her husband Connor walked in first, carrying a bottle of wine you could tell he chose because the label looked expensive, not because he knew a damn thing about wine. He shook my hand with the kind of grip meant to dominate, not greet. Claire followed, perfume heavy, hair perfectly curled. She had that polished corporate smile she reserves for clients and Instagram pictures, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "Dad," she sang, hugging me as if she were greeting an old mentor she barely remembered. Behind her came my grandson, 3 years old, a little sunbeam in sneakers. He ran to me like I was home. I would hold on to that moment later, when everything else hurt. Dinner smelled of roasted chicken and garlic potatoes. I cooked it myself, not because I expected thanks, but because I knew none would arrive if I didn't. Connor spent most of it on his phone, periodically scrolling through messages with the self-satisfied grin of a man who believes every sentence he types changes the world. Claire talked about her career, how she was killing it, how she was next in line for promotion, how everyone on her team was jealous. She didn't ask how I was doing, neither of them did. It was during dessert that I decided to give her the first box. The small one, not the one that mattered. It sat on the table while she talked, a simple square wrapped in silver paper. She barely looked at it until her husband nudged her with his elbow. "Oh right," she said, brushing crumbs from her lips. "Dad's present." She peeled the paper lazily, more interested in her own voice than the object inside. The ribbon fell to the floor. She didn't pick it up. Inside was a necklace. Gold, elegant, small but thoughtfully chosen. The kind of gift a father gives a grown daughter because he knows the weight of sentimental objects over flashy ones. She lifted it between 2 fingers like a used handkerchief. "This is it." I blinked. She wasn't asking. She was scoffing. It wasn't the words themselves. People say crueler things. It was the tone. Disappointment, inflated with entitlement. Her husband laughed. Not loud, but loud enough. "I told you he'd get you something old school," he said, swirling his wine. "Guy's entire wardrobe is flannels." My grandson, chewing a piece of potato, looked at his mother like he wasn't sure what was happening. Even children know when something is wrong. I smiled. People don't understand how powerful a smile can be when you're not hurt, just confirming what you already suspected. "It's beautiful," I said gently. "You don't have to like it." She shrugged, tossed the box aside, and turned back to her dessert. The necklace lay half buried in tissue paper like a found object no one claimed ownership of. That wasn't the moment I decided to teach her a lesson. That moment came years earlier. After the divorce, she moved in with her mother and her new husband, who showered her with gifts. When she needed braces, it was me who paid. When she needed private tutoring for chemistry, it was me who paid. When she totaled her first car, it was me who emptied my savings. When her stepfather took her to Paris, it was him who got the photos, the credit, the thank yous. Claire learned early that love wasn't sacrifice. Love was display. She never learned the cost of things, only the price, so I made a decision. Years ago. A cabin near Lake Hargrove, a place I'd bought in cash after my mother died. tucked between pines and dirt roads and childhood summers I never got to have. I renovated it slowly. I cut down dead trees myself. I installed the dock. I repaired the shutters with my own hands. I intended it to be her inheritance, not because she deserved it, because I wanted her to one day understand that love is labor, the kind that isn't Instagrammable. So as she rolled her eyes at the necklace, I didn't flinch. I simply got up from the table, walked into the study, and pulled out the second envelope. White, plain, heavy only if you know what's inside it. I came back and laid it on the table beside her empty plate. "What's that?" she asked. "Open it," I said. Connor leaned in, suddenly invested. He smelled money the way a wolf smells blood. She tore it open, not careful now, but hungry. The deed slid into her lap. Lake Hargrove, a map, coordinates, property. Her eyes widened in slow motion, the way dawn crawls across a bedroom wall. "Oh my God," she whispered. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the child I raised, the one who used to climb into my lap when she was scared, the one who cried when she failed her spelling test because she didn't want to disappoint me, the one who spent summers feeding ducks and pretending she was a princess in the woods. Her smile wasn't polished or weaponized, it was real. And then I took it back. I lifted the envelope from her hands and tucked it into my jacket. She stared at me, confused. "What are you doing?" "That," I said quietly, "was for the daughter who respected me." The room fell silent. Her husband looked like someone had slapped him in church. My grandson blinked, trying to understand why Mommy's voice turned sharp. The box with the necklace lay on the carpet where her laughter put it. For the first time in years, she couldn't say a word. People think that when you take something away from someone, the reaction is explosive. It isn't. Sometimes it's quiet. Like a crack forming in glass, no sound, just pressure. After I took the deed back, the silence didn't fall like a curtain. It sank, slowly, like water rising in a basement. Claire stared at me, wide-eyed, as if she wasn't sure a parent was allowed to do what I had done. "You're kidding," she said finally. Not angry, confused, almost amused. She expected the moment to be theatrical. She waited for the punchline. I said nothing. Her husband looked at her, then at me, and tried to perform outrage on her behalf. "You can't just," he pointed at the envelope in my hand like it was contraband, "dangle property like that and then yank it back." I didn't look at him. I spoke only to her. "I didn't dangle anything," I said. "You reacted to the first gift, that's all." Her cheeks reddened. "You're taking the cabin away because I didn't like a necklace." I leaned back in my chair. Slowly, deliberately. "No," I said. "I'm taking it away because of the daughter I saw when you opened it." She blinked rapidly. Her lips trembled. She was trying to calculate the angle she'd just hit. You see, some people don't process consequences. They process optics. In her mind, the necklace wasn't a sentimental gesture. It was a poor investment, a low-tier gift, a downgrade, an insult to her self-image. The cabin, on the other hand, was status, a symbol, influencer vacations by the lake, a place to drink wine with the girls, a backdrop for engagement photos. She saw it all in the 5 seconds she held it. Her greed lit every neuron, and when it disappeared, so did her smile. She stood up so suddenly her chair scraped the floor. "Dad, you're being dramatic." Her voice sharpened. Not the shy girl who once pressed her face into my chest at her first heartbreak. This was the corporate negotiator, the manipulator, the woman who weaponized politeness like a blade. She reached for the envelope. I shifted it out of her reach with the same motion a father uses to lift scissors from a toddler. "Sit," I said, not yelled, not begged, just the single syllable of someone who has raised a child from tantrums to adulthood. She sat, not because she respected me, but because I wasn't bending. Her husband scoffed. "Look," he said, hands raised, palms up, like a mediator at a divorce hearing. "I think you're taking this way too personally. It's her birthday, too." "It's my birthday," I corrected. "I'm 64 today. I invited you into my home. I cooked dinner. I gave gifts." He opened his mouth. I raised one finger. He stopped. "For once," I said, "I would like to be treated as more than a bank account with arthritis." He stiffened. Claire stared at the envelope now like a starving person watching bread. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm sorry if the necklace came off wrong." "If," I echoed. She blinked. Confusion twisted into irritation. Why wasn't the apology working? She turned to her husband, seeking partnership. "Say something," she whispered. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, confident again. "I'll say it plainly," he announced. She was expecting something more significant. "She's not a child. You can't give grown adults trinkets and hope they act grateful." There it was, not disrespect born from ignorance, but entitlement born from comfort. He thought he was the adult in the room, the father of her son, the man she chose, the replacement for the father who built her life quietly brick by brick. He thought he was the new king. I learned something about him in that moment. He had never done anything difficult, never lifted anything heavy, never sat beside someone's hospital bed at 3 a.m. hoping they lived, never scrubbed vomit from the back seat of a car after a school dance gone wrong, never sat through a night of sobs after a broken friendship. He didn't understand what sacrifice was. He only understood profit. He mistook generosity for weakness. I stood and walked toward the kitchen counter where the deed lay. Claire followed me with her eyes, like prey locked onto the hunter's knife. "You know why I bought the cabin?" I asked. She said nothing. "You told me once," I continued, "when you were 16, that you wanted a place that felt like a storybook, somewhere you could breathe, somewhere that didn't have your mother's rules or your stepfather's judgment. You said you wanted a place where it would just be us." I stared at my hands on the envelope. They're older now. Wrinkles like riverbeds. Hands that carried her when she was 4 and feverish. Hands that held her mouth to mouth when she nearly drowned in the pool. Hands that would have given her anything if she hadn't turned into someone who mocked gifts she didn't choose. "That cabin was never an investment," I said. "It was a promise." Her lips parted. I saw the little girl again for a fraction of a second. Lost, small, scared. Then it vanished. "You can't guilt me into performing gratitude," she snapped. I turned. "No," I said gently, "I can't guilt you into anything. I can only decide which version of you I reward." That sentence hit harder than any slap. She recoiled. Her husband slammed his glass down. "She's your daughter, not a candidate for a FOC job interview." I smiled. "You're wrong. Parenthood is a job interview. Every year, every decade, you apply to enter someone's adult life. You show them who you are, and they decide if they want you in it," she whispered. "Someday," I said, "if you learn to respect what isn't shiny, trendy, or Instagram approved, if you learn to value sincerity over spectacle, if you learn the difference between price and cost." I held the envelope. "Maybe then, the cabin will go to you." Her face hardened like wet clay drying too fast. "You're punishing me," she breathed. "No," I replied. "I'm educating you." For the rest of the evening, they stayed. Not because they wanted to, because they didn't know how to leave. They ate dessert in awkward silence. Connor avoided eye contact. Claire drank wine like medicine. My grandson fell asleep curled against me on the couch. He snored faintly, the kind of innocent sound adults spend their whole lives trying to return to. I kissed the top of his head. I didn't say another word to her that night. Not because I was angry, because nothing I could say would be more powerful than the envelope she didn't get to keep. When the front door finally closed behind them, the quiet wasn't lonely. It was relief, the kind you feel when you finally put down a weight you've been pretending wasn't heavy. That night, I didn't dream of my daughter. I dreamed of pine trees and lake water, and how silence can teach lessons louder than shouting ever could. Some betrayals don't land in the moment. They arrive when the lights are off, when dishes are stacked in the sink, when your own reflection stares back at you with eyes that finally understand the thing you tried to ignore. Claire called at 7:14 a.m. Too early for anger, too late for sleep. I was making coffee, black, the way I've had it since I was 22 and couldn't afford cream, when my phone buzzed across the counter. Her name was on the screen. I didn't answer. She let it ring all the way through. 30 seconds later, a text. "Can we talk?" I stared at those 3 words. They didn't mean I'm sorry. They meant let me fix the optics. People like her don't apologize. They negotiate. I set the phone down and continued grinding beans. At 8:03, she switched strategies. "I think you misunderstood me last night." Ah, there it was. The sentence of someone who thinks reality is negotiable. I still didn't reply. Her next message came fast, frantic. "I didn't mean it like that. I was just overwhelmed and tired," and she was not apologizing. She was adjusting. She needed me to believe the problem was tone, not character. I placed the phone face down and drank my coffee. Outside, the world looked normal. Sunlight warming the porch, a squirrel running the fence line, a delivery truck humming down the street. Inside, my silence was a verdict. By noon, the texts escalated. I didn't know you took it so seriously. It was a necklace, Dad. You know I like sentimental things. I just didn't expect something so simple. I shouldn't have reacted like that. I was caught off guard. Notice the phrasing, it, you. I was caught off guard. Not once, I was cruel. I was disrespectful. I hurt you. She wasn't apologizing. She was explaining. There's a difference. Around 1 p.m., the call finally came from someone unexpected. Not her. Connor. His voice held that performative calm men use when they need to dominate a room without fists. Mr. Carver, he said. He never called me by my first name. Not out of respect, out of hierarchy. I want to clarify something, he continued. Claire was emotional last night. She didn't mean to insult you. You know how women get when they're—
He stopped.
He must have heard the shift in my breath. Finish that sentence, I said. Silence. He cleared his throat. What I'm trying to say is, she reacted poorly, but the cabin is a big commitment. It shouldn't be something you throw around like a bargaining chip. I smiled without humor. Funny, I replied. I thought raising a child was a big commitment, but apparently that counts less than a box. He didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. People like him drown in silence. Finally, he asked, so what happens next? I almost laughed, because that question revealed everything. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought we were haggling over real estate, like two businessmen at a bad steakhouse. There is no next, I said calmly. There is only what has already happened. He inhaled as if preparing to hit harder. You're damaging your relationship with your daughter. I let that hang in the air like smoke. Then I said, I'm not damaging anything. I'm just no longer subsidizing disrespect. He exhaled through his nose, frustrated. You know she was counting on that cabin. We've been thinking about remodeling, renting it seasonally, maybe, The truth slipped out like a loose screw. They didn't want the cabin to live in. They wanted income, Airbnb weekends, a lakeside brand, a portfolio piece. They didn't want a memory. They wanted leverage. You just told me everything I needed to know, I said, and hung up. I walked into the den, to a drawer few people know exists. Inside, I kept letters Claire wrote me as a child, handwritten apologies for losing a toy, notes in crayon that said I love you, Daddy, drawings of us fishing in a lake that didn't exist yet. I sat in my leather chair, holding them, feeling the paper edges where childhood once lived. I remembered the cabin's second layer. Not a gift, a sanctuary. The first year after buying it, I went every weekend, alone. Not because I was lonely, because I wanted to rebuild. I'd sit on the porch at dawn, listening to the lake breathe mist off its skin, the wood creaking under my weight, the sky streaking itself purple and orange. I planted small trees. I cut firewood. I taught myself how to replace a window with no help and no YouTube tutorial. I imagined her there, 16-year-old Claire, laughing on the dock, feet in the water, hair braided, asking me about life. I imagined her future children running barefoot through the pine needles. I imagined birthdays by the shore. I imagined Sunday mornings where she would come home not for money, but for peace. I imagined a version of her that never learned how to roll her eyes at kindness. That's the version the cabin was for. Not the woman who saw gifts like trophies. At 4 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Not her. Not Connor. Their son. He held a crumpled drawing of pine trees, lake, and a cabin. The colors ran outside the lines. Mom said we're going here, he said. I knelt down and looked him in the eyes. Someday, I whispered, when Mommy learns how to treat gifts like love, not prizes. He didn't understand the words. He didn't need to. Children learn through feeling long before they learn through vocabulary. He hugged my leg. Children don't need ownership to be grateful. They need presence. Claire stood beside her car, arms folded, watching. Her face was unreadable. Not angry, not embarrassed. Something worse. Threatened. She thought the cabin made her powerful. She didn't realize it exposed her. She stormed toward me the moment I closed the door after her son ran back to her. You had no right to speak to him like that, she hissed. I spoke truth, I replied. You're weaponizing morality to punish me. I raised my eyebrow. You're weaponizing entitlement to demand inheritance. She blinked, a hit she didn't see coming. Her voice shook, fingers trembling around her keys. You taught me I deserved the best. No, I cut in gently. I taught you that I would sacrifice for you. You decided that meant the world would too. That landed. Deep. Something in her eyes flickered, an unwanted memory. The winter she totaled her Jeep on black ice. She called me from a ditch, sobbing. I arrived before the tow truck. I wrapped her in my coat. I stayed all night at the hospital. She never told that story online. It wasn't glamorous enough. She swallowed hard. Dad, people don't treat me like this in my life. I nodded. I know, and that's why you're losing parts of your life you think you're entitled to. Her eyes glistened, not from humility, from fear. Fear that her behavior finally met someone who would not bend to it, and that someone was the one person she thought would bend forever. She left without yelling. That's the thing about real accountability. It doesn't spark tantrums. It ignites silence. That night, I sat on the couch, door shut, lights off, no TV, hands folded. I was not grieving her. I was grieving the version of her that never got to grow, the little girl who once whispered, "Daddy, don't ever leave me," and who later became the woman who never said, "Daddy, thank you." People think regret arrives like lightning fast, violent, obvious. But regret doesn't roar. It sleeps, it waits. It finds a crack in the armor and drips through, drop by drop, until every confident thought tastes like rust. Claire didn't call the day after I refused her. Not once. I thought she might. I expected it, actually. But silence from her? That was new. I imagined her curled on a couch, face buried in her husband's shoulder while he told her I was overreacting, and that all she needed to do was stand her ground. But here's the thing people like her never realize. Stubbornness isn't strength. It's fear wearing lipstick. It wasn't her who reached out first. It was my son, Michael. He's 38, 2 years younger than Claire, and the closest thing I have to quiet reassurance in my bloodline. He called around 6:30 p.m., voice careful, like he didn't want to intrude on something delicate. "Dad?" I felt it immediately, the tone of someone trying to talk around the fire instead of into it. "Before you say anything," I told him, "you're not responsible for your sister." He exhaled into the phone, relieved I had named it first. "I know," he said. "It's just, she came to us today." "Us?" I asked. "Helen and me." His wife, gentle, smart, clinical in the way people are when they don't lie to themselves. "What did she want?" I asked. "A correction," he said softly. "No apology, just a rewritten version of last night." That sentence made my jaw tighten. Claire didn't want forgiveness. She wanted revision. Michael continued. "She said you embarrassed her, that you humiliated her in front of her husband and your grandson." I leaned back in my chair. "And?" I asked. "We told her she embarrassed herself." My heart warmed in my chest for the first time since the dinner. He paused before speaking again. "She started crying. Not because of what she did, because she didn't get the cabin." Of course, that was the difference between remorse and frustration. Remorse says, "I hurt someone." Frustration says, "My trick didn't work." Not with grace, not with dignity. She arrived in a storm of knuckles against wood. She didn't knock. She hammered. I opened the door to find her in a sweatshirt and leggings, hair undone, eyes swollen from a private rage. "I need to talk," she said, pushing past me before I could respond. That alone told me everything. She wasn't here to listen. She was here to perform. She sat at the table she once smirked at, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "I'm sorry," she blurted. The words came fast, rehearsed, sterile. The apology of a politician caught embezzling, not a daughter who'd hurt her father. I sat across from her. "For what?" I asked. She blinked, annoyed. "You know for what?" "No," I said, calm. "I want to hear you say it." She rolled her eyes, the gesture she didn't even know was her wound. "That," she gestured wildly. "The necklace, the whole reaction. I didn't mean it." "That isn't what you're sorry for," I said. She clenched her teeth. "Fine. I'm sorry for the way I acted." "No," I said again. She inhaled sharply through her nose, anger rising like steam. "Dad, why do you make everything harder than it needs to be?" "Because," I replied. "You make everything easier than it deserves to be." She blinked, processing. "You think life is a vending machine," I said. "You press a button and what you want drops into your hand." She scoffed. "You always act like I grew up spoiled." "You did. I worked for everything I have." "No," I said gently. "You complained until someone gave it to you." Her mask cracked, not shattered, just fractured. "I grew up with a single mom," she snapped. "We didn't have everything. We weren't rich." I stared at her. I was the single parent. My ex remarried when she was 12. They lived in a bigger house, bought new cars every 2 years, took vacations without me. Claire rewrote the narrative to survive her own ego. You grew up with 2 parents, I said quietly. One of them did the work. The other took the credit. She froze. She had never heard it phrased so plainly. She looked at her hands, knuckles whitening around each other like a rope tightening. Then came the part I had been expecting, the plea hidden in anger. I deserve the cabin. There it was, naked, ugly, pure. She didn't say she wanted to earn it. She didn't say she wanted to be better. She said she deserved it. I leaned forward. Why? She didn't hesitate. Because I'm your daughter. I nodded once. A slow, heavy nod. That used to be enough, I said, but then you changed what being my daughter meant. She stared at me the way a person stares at dark water, hoping something beneath the surface will wink at them and say they imagined the depth. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Connor. She silenced it immediately. That was the first sign. I talked to him, she said, suddenly smaller. He thinks you're trying to control me. I'm not, I replied. I'm trying to stop you from controlling me. Her lips parted as if she'd been slapped. That's not fair. What's not fair? I asked. That you can treat kindness like an inconvenience? That you were handed a life people would kill for? That you mistake generosity for obligation? She shook her head violently. You don't understand what it's like to be me, she said. No, I replied. I understand perfectly. I just don't sympathize. I stood up and walked to the den again. Claire followed with her eyes but didn't get up. I returned with a photo from when she was 10. Her hair in crooked pigtails, missing front tooth, holding a fishing pole too big for her frame. Her smile was genuine. Her arm around my waist like I was the entire world. I placed it in front of her. She stared at it as if it were evidence in court. Who is that? I asked. She frowned. What do you mean? That's me. No, I said softly. That's who you were. She swallowed slowly. That girl wasn't embarrassed by gifts, I continued. She wasn't ashamed of effort. She wasn't obsessed with winning. Her voice cracked. People grow up. People mature, I said. They don't calcify. She pressed her nails into her palm. I don't know how to be that person, she whispered. Her honesty came not from guilt but from exhaustion. I leaned forward once more. You don't need to be her again, I said. You just need to stop being the woman who rolls her eyes at love. Her eyes glistened, but tears don't equal change. They only show pressure. I placed the photograph in her hands. Then I stood. That cabin, I said, is a place for the person in that picture, not the one sitting at my table today. She didn't scream. She didn't bargain. She broke, quietly, eyes down, chest shaking, breaths uneven, and that was the beginning of regret. Not the lesson learned, just the realization. She had lost something real, and it wasn't coming back because she demanded it. Regret doesn't start with change. It starts with exposure. A person can go their whole life thinking they're generous, loyal, respectful, until the mirror stops lying. For Claire, that mirror wasn't the cabin. It wasn't the necklace. It wasn't the envelope I took back. It was the emptiness that followed. Because after she left my house that day, she finally realized something she'd never believed. I was willing to live without her. She wasn't willing to live without me. The first hint came from Michael again, 11 days later. He called during his lunch break, voice low. Dad, he said, have you talked to Claire? No. He sighed, long and tired. She and Connor are not doing well. He hesitated, like he didn't know how to phrase it without sounding cruel. She's realizing the 2 of them didn't want the cabin for the same reason. I sat back in my chair. Go on. He exhaled. She pictured holidays, family memories, somewhere to bring the kids. And him? He pictured revenue streams. Michael didn't have to say more. Connor was the kind of man who bragged about his investments before they matured. The kind of person who bought boxes of followers for social media, then called himself an influencer. A man who wanted stability without having to earn it. And when the deed disappeared from their grasp, so did their plan. I didn't laugh, not because I was sympathetic, but because I'd already seen that storm brewing the moment he mentioned remodeling and rentals. The cabin wasn't a home to him. It was a brand, and when the brand evaporated, so did the facade of the marriage he thought he controlled. Claire tried to save face the following weekend. She hosted a dinner for her in-laws. 3 of them came, people who still thought her scraped knees earned applause. She called me afterward, frantic. They kept asking, she said breathlessly. They wanted pictures. They wanted a tour date. They told me how smart we were to secure a second property. I listened in silence, and I didn't know what to say. I had to pretend it was still happening. Why? I asked. Her voice fluttered like paper in wind. Because I'm not a liar. The sentence was so absurd it didn't even sting. It just hovered in the air like bad perfume. 3 days later, she posted a life lesson slideshow on Instagram, a black and white photo of her face, a caption about gratitude and loving your parents while they're still here, something nauseatingly public. One of those posts that reads like a prayer but smells like sales. It garnered likes, it earned comments. Her friends wrote, "You're amazing. You're so strong. You're such a good daughter." Except one. Her cousin, Anna. A quiet girl, level-headed, not afraid of truth. She commented, "Respect is shown in private, Claire, not performed online." That one line sank her entire sea. Followers who once adored her began to dig. No one cares about your inspirational posts when someone hints you're a hypocrite. People asked questions. Comments started shifting tone. And as they did, Claire disappeared off social media faster than a politician caught with offshore accounts. I saw her again by accident, at the grocery store. Pale, hair undone, mascara smudged into the corners of her eyes. She didn't walk toward me at first. She hovered near the carts, fingers gripping the metal handle like it was the last stable object in her life. When she finally approached, it wasn't with arrogance or entitlement. It was with knees that no longer trusted the floor. "Dad," she said softly. The word didn't feel like a label. It felt like she was asking permission to use it. I turned the corner into the canned goods aisle, and she followed, steps small and uneven. "I know I messed up," she murmured. There was no anger now, only fear. Fear that she had burned not the cabin, not the gift, but the bridge she thought was indestructible. "I was stupid," she continued. I thought you were just being old. I didn't think you'd actually mean it." I stopped walking. "Just being old," I repeated. She flinched. I didn't mean it like you meant it exactly like that," I said calmly. "And that's the problem." She put a hand against a stack of soup cans to steady herself. "I didn't realize how much it meant to you." "No," I said gently. "You didn't realize how much you meant to me until you found out you could lose it." Her bottom lip trembled. She bit it, then whispered, "I'm sorry." This time, it wasn't a performance. It wasn't rehearsed. It sounded like something she had never said honestly in her adult life. She didn't ask for the cabin. She didn't mention her husband. She didn't bring up the deed. Just 2 words. Small, raw, human. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "I hear you," I said, "and I meant it. But apology alone isn't redemption. It is only the first nail pulled from the wood." 2 months later, autumn brushed the edges of the lake with orange and gold. The air became crisp. The water darkened. I spent most weekends there, repairing the dock, chopping firewood, sweeping pine needles from the porch. On the 3rd weekend of October, I heard gravel crunching. Cars don't sound the same on remote roadbeds. They arrive slow, hesitant, like they aren't sure they belong. I looked up. Claire stood at the end of the path. No makeup, hair in a loose tie, wearing jeans she didn't pick for anyone else. She didn't wave. She didn't shout. She just walked down the path toward me, hands in her pockets. I didn't greet her. I simply waited. She stopped 3 feet away from the steps and stared at the porch like it was an old friend she betrayed. "I never came here," she murmured, voice tiny. "No," I said. "You never did." She swallowed. "I always thought it would just be given to me." There it was, not entitlement anymore. Reflection. "I thought that's how family worked," she continued. "You give things. You get things. You don't have to earn love." I rested my palms on the porch railing, letting her speak. She looked at the tree line. "When you took it away," she said, "I thought you were punishing me." "And now?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "I think you were finally telling me how much I never understood." The wind carried pine needles past her feet. She lifted her face to the lake. "I don't want it," she whispered. "Not now." It wasn't a trick. It wasn't reverse psychology. It was a confession. "I'm not the person who could take care of it," she said. "I'm not the person who should." I stepped down from the porch and stood beside her. "You could be," I said, "but that isn't my responsibility anymore." Her eyes filled. For the first time in years, I touched her shoulder. She didn't collapse into me. She didn't plead, she just nodded, and that was the moment she finally understood. The cabin wasn't the gift, the cabin was the mirror. She lost what she mocked, not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to keep rewarding the part of her that mocked the kind of man who spent his life loving her quietly. Some lessons you don't teach with words, some gifts you don't give with ribbons, some punishments you don't deliver with anger. And if they change, the next time they stand at your door you'll know, not because they ask for something, but because they knock gently.